Hello, this is Casey from The Curious Crafter, and today I'm going to show you how to tink or unknit. Tink is knit spelled backwards, and that's what we are going to do. Say you've made a mistake in your knitting and you need to go back, but you don't want to go all the way back. We are going to take the working yarn, the ones that we just knit, and have them in our right hand. You're going to be doing all the work this time with your left needle. It's going to be completely opposite of what you're used to. For this, you want to think of each stitch has a little bullseye, a little arrow for your little arrow to go through. I like to find out how to unknit by looking where my working yarn is coming out. So it's coming out of this loop right here. There it is. So I'm going to take my arrow and put it right through the center of that, right where that yarn is coming out. And what's going to happen is we're going to just pull that one stitch off our right hand needle and back onto the left hand needle and tug on the yarn. We've undid a stitch. To do that again, there's our stitch on our needle. That's the one we need to undo. And then there's the stitch right below it. Right there is where our yarn is coming out. That's how we find our little bullseye. For the stitch underneath, take our arrow, put it right through the middle of that bullseye, putting the loop back on our left hand needle and pulling the one off our right hand. And tug on your working yarn. I'm going to do a couple more knit stitches for you, and then I'll show you how it looks in purl. We're going to see where our working yarn is. Our arrow, our needle is going to go in where that yarn is coming out. Pull off. There, pull off. And one more knit stitch. We have our little V underneath our stitch on the needle. We're going to find where the yarn is coming out. I'm holding this yarn tight in my right hand. Stick it in and out. Doing this so I can tug on it to kind of see where the yarn is coming out. So on the purl stitches, you see the little bump underneath the needle. That means you have done a purl stitch. You're going to do the same system. You can put the yarn in the front, see where the yarn is coming out. You put your needle in the same space. This needle is going to always go from the front to the back. And we're going to pull a stitch off. Now I prefer to actually carry the yarn that I'm undoing to the back of the work no matter what, but it might be easier for you to continue to hold it in the front for purl stitches. So I'm tugging on my yarn, I'm seeing where it's coming out of the stitch, going through the front of the stitch on below, and then pulling off. I've undone a purl. Another one. Tugging and through. Now you might be wondering, well, Casey, what if I have something like a knit two together that I need to undo? Well, to do those, let me get over here. Right here we have a knit two together. You can see two loops. One loop, two loop. To undo those, we're going to follow the yarn coming out, find it right underneath there, and go through both loops. See, I'm going to the same direction that yarn path is going through those loops. Putting my needle in both, sliding off that stitch, and yanking on the yarn. Now I have two stitches. Right here I'm working with just the one. finding where the yarn is coming out, going through both loops, following the path of that yarn that's coming out of there, and pulling it. Now we have 2 stitches back on the left needle. Now in SSK, undoing that is a little bit trickier. This is the one time that you're not going to go through the front of the stitch to undo it. This time you're actually going to go from behind. You're still going in the same place where that yarn is coming out. You're following the path of it there up to the front, putting it on your needle, taking the one off, tugging, and then you'll see here that on your slip slip knit you have slipped those stitches and twisted your stitch the opposite direction. So when you're tinking, you need to either take these stitches from one needle back to the other, but this time we're going to come behind the stitch to slip it back over. The next one, slip it back over. You've untwisted them, then you can just go straight back over. 1, 2. The other way that you can do this on a slip slip knit is to pay attention to your knitting. So first you would undo your slip slip knit by following the path of the yarn, tugging, and then instead of fixing those stitches, when you come back around to knit them again, remember to twist them by knitting them through the back loop. That will automatically twist your stitch back into the correct position. And that is how you tink.